Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. About 1 month ago, we held a joint press conference with Operation Lifesaver to announce this joint campaign. This is an extension of the successful Courtesy Matters campaign that New York City Transit Marketing developed a couple of years ago and has had great success in social media and elsewhere in getting people to engage with our courtesy campaign. We felt it prudent to extend that to our safety messaging, and that has worked well for us. There are subway and bus brochures that go to our customers, even brochures that are specific to students where we have issues with them exhibiting unsafe behavior in our system. There are subway posters throughout the system that talk about intrusion and not going on the tracks if you drop something, other unsafe behaviors. So new posters for our bus riders and those that are not bus riders but interact with our buses, whether it be on bicycles or walking. We see a growing instance of people being distracted by the mobile devices that all of us carry. And so we are trying to address that through this campaign as well. More to the Operation Lifesaver partnership involving our grade crossings. So we have developed a series of posters that are now on in our stations, on our equipment, and elsewhere to talk about some of the more common behaviors that we fear. Cars not waiting for the gate, and we've developed, I'll play these for you, we've developed some animated versions of these to go along with the static images that are being used on our media elsewhere.
Wait for the gate. Isn't your life worth the wait? Learn more at mta.info/safety.
MTA.info/safety is a dedicated web page that has all of the safety tips for all of our modes of travel. And we're measuring successful traffic to that website through this campaign. I'll get into those measurements in a moment. We have another one with people dashing around the crossing gates to get to a train that may be approaching on the other side.
Don't make this dash your last. Isn't your life worth the wait? Learn more at mta.info/safety.
We have those being distracted again by devices going across the grade crossing. Trespassers on our tracks, which is more common during the summer months when students are out of school, and we also have a video for that one.
Don't shortcut your life. Trespassing on tracks is always illegal and too often deadly. Learn more at mta.info/safety.
And we even have one that was specific to the Hudson Line, where we have evidence of fishermen using the right-of-way as a shortcut to where they think the fish might be. So we have been using both our own media to promote this campaign as well as paid media. And we've also earned some media through the PSA outreach that we've been doing. So we have posters on our subways, trains, and buses, in our stations. Our social media campaign, we set up a hashtag MTA Safety to try to get the discussion around safety to populate social media channels. The animated videos that you've seen here without the sound are being shown on our on-the-go kiosk screens, our digital urban panels at street-level station entrances, screens at Penn, Grand Central, Jamaica, Atlantic, Fulton, and elsewhere, and of course the website, dedicated website page. In paid media, we are on about 405 screens in our service territory at movie theaters, playing each of the 3 animations that you saw. We have print in Metro New York, which all of our subway riders tend to read. We have 10 million impressions purchased on Facebook, which will run through the end of the year. Cranes, Newsday, New York Daily News, and Connecticut Media Group, so covering all of our service territory online with these videos. Strategically, sure, question?
Very brief one. I didn't see the Journal News, which is the primary news source for Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Putnam, those 3 counties, which it covers. Are we in the Journal News?
We're not in the Journal News. We are online in many of the news channels, but Facebook is giving us a lot of reach because we can target. I'll get into that in a moment. We can target people through Facebook very effectively. We took the limited dollars that we have and tried to strategically put those in waves, 5 different waves, which target drivers primarily during the high traffic periods when people are on the roads leading up to July 4th, the back-to-school period, Thanksgiving, the December holidays, and New Year's Eve. So the weeks leading up to those key events, we're running more heavily. We can geo-target by somebody's profile, location, or trip plan. So if somebody is near a grade crossing at Roaring Brook, we can sense that. We can get them through Facebook with our message. If their desktop at their home is in our service territory, we can serve the ad to them. If they are planning a trip to New York that's going to take them across one of our grade crossings, we can, again, serve them with that ad. So we geo-target as specifically as we can. Our advertising sales vendor, Outfront Media, has generously offered to use unsold space on their digital and static billboards in New York to run this campaign. It is actually, this has been updated since yesterday. We're up to about 18 outdoor digital or static billboards, has a value to the MTA of about $200,000 per month. There's a few ways we've measured success of this campaign. Since the June 18th press event, we generated 42 articles about the campaign. The industry average click-through rate is a 0.05%. So if somebody sees our banner online, approximately 1/2 of people on average would click through on that. We're seeing a 1.2% pickup on Facebook, almost a 1% pickup on New York Daily News. You can see the numbers here. So we're pretty much exceeding industry average with this campaign. The MTA.info/safety dedicated page has had nearly 2,500 page views through July 17th. And the average session length for those visits is over 2 minutes. So we know people are not just going there and clicking away. They're engaging with the content and learning something, which is encouraging. Questions?
Neil, you make a good point about the Journal News. I mean, one advantage we have in New York City is we've got 3 dailies that publish, actually 4 Wall Street Journal. And on Long Island, we've got that strong Newsday presence and have for years. And we probably should get to a point where we have the same type of quote-unquote relationship with the Journal News, because their reach is pretty strong. Did you have another question, Neil?
I did. This is a great presentation. I appreciate you guys are doing it. I know we've talked about communications many times, and the notion of having both earned, paid, and owned media working for us is important. A couple of things I wanted to mention. One, what is the total value of the paid media for this set of campaigns?
We invested $250,000 in that campaign.
And then my second, with more of a comment than a question, I'm not sure how many people outside of this room are actually going to that dedicated website for safety, so I'm not sure. 2,500 page views or visits is not a huge number. One thing I'd like to suggest is the primary reason why people go to our website is for scheduling, right? What time's the train, that kind of thing. And while I can imagine it'd be considered maybe an irritant at times, I wonder if there's value in us having a pop-up that comes up when someone is going to look at their schedule or look at a map that is, in fact, the safety message. Maybe not the 15-second video, but even a message that says safety. And I bring that up only because the more we can create forced interactions, whether it be in social media, news feeds, wherever, where someone is actually confronted with this message and they see it, and it's everything we talk about. It is the primary thing we do, that is safety first always. I'd love to see that. And so it would be great, I would imagine, that when I go to look at my schedule, maybe a bit of an irritant, but a good irritant, that says that truly safety is first, because it comes before I even tell you what time the train is going to be when you look at it. So just, I'd love you to consider, because $250,000 is obviously a paltry amount of spend from a media campaign standpoint. So your notion of using all other forms, I love what you're doing on remnant inventory with Outfront, but let's just continue to evolve the great work you're already doing And that is just one example of something I think we could do.
We can certainly do that. Thank you.
And there are great ideas that are being talked about in terms of social media and driving traffic to the site and generating dialogue about the campaign and other safety messages. So points well taken. From the general to the specific, when we last met in May, I believe it was, we talked about some then planned upgrades at the Roaring Brook Road crossing in Chappaqua, New York. And most of that work has since been accomplished. And I believe it was you, Mr. Pally, who asked, could we come back with a little bit of a show and tell of before and after? And so we put that together to show you some of what was done there.
Good morning. With a bit of planning and some terrific cooperation by the town of Newcastle, the New York State Department of Transportation, and Metro North, we are actually in about a week and a half going to finish the final segment of Roaring Brook. But what you'll see here is the most important piece. A crossing that had virtually no highway markings, the signage was missing or in poor condition, and this demonstrates first of all, the before and after, so to speak. This is looking east, and again, looking east after we've paved, put the highway markings in, and the white line to the left is what we call the fog line in the transportation world, and that basically, we're probably one of the first agencies to put the fog line through the grade crossing to keep cars delineated onto their path. This is, again, a before looking towards the parkway, towards the Sawmill River Parkway. And as you can see, the roadway's in quite disrepair. And again, if you go to the after, we have the highway markings, the new signage, along with a brand-new grade crossing deck.
Let me interrupt. The white and the yellow lines, are those our lines, or are those DOT lines, or are those Town of Newcastle lines? Whose lines are they?
They're everybody's, actually. The cooperation, as I said, was tremendous, and the DOT did everything on the west side, on the Sawmill River Parkway side, and the Town of Newcastle did everything on the east side of the crossing,
Right.
and Metro North did everything in the middle. But when we got to...
That aren't familiar with the grade crossing, this is a very complicated grade crossing, because the Sawmill River Parkway is this, it's a limited access highway.
Right.
Semi-limited access highway, where, vehicle speeds are posted at 55, but they're probably in excess of that. There's the tracks here, and then there's two roads that fan out east of that crossing.
Is
It's a very complicated crossing.
the point, I think extending the lines through the grade crossing is a fantastic idea. Is that now going to be our mantra in other grade crossings? Because I can assure you, that does not happen on Long Island. Okay, the line stops. And so the question is, and I understand in some cases it's not our line. That's why I asked the question of whose line is it? Because I think extending the lines through the grade crossing is a great idea. Now the question is, can we make that happen at more than just this one place?
Yeah, we've had it in a few places, and with the communities who are responsible to paint lines, whether it's a local street or a state street, they've all said yes up to this point.
Okay.
And so it's really a no-brainer.
I think it'd be worthwhile to just digress for a second away from Roaring Brook and stand back and from a general perspective. As you know, we've enlisted the support of an outside expert consultant who does work with Class I railroads, and it's Rick Campbell and Associates. And they bring a skill set that not only knows the detailed technologies from both a signaling standpoint, but from a traffic control standpoint, but they bring a wealth of experience in terms of how you bring those three jurisdictions together to try to get unanimity in terms of an approach.
Right.
Because the implementation of MUCTD is one in which it's joint responsibilities by the railroad, by the state DOT, and by the local jurisdiction. And what Joe said, in this particular case, there was alignment because of the high-profile priority need to do something here. But that's the model we would attempt to follow other places. And we've asked him to serve as a catalyst, not necessarily just representing our interests, representing the interests of all three parties to get the best solution at a particular grade crossing.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? If I see this correctly, the warning sign is no more than maybe 30 feet from the grade crossing itself. As my friend Mr. Giletti to my left will tell you, in the state of Florida, among other places, they provide, at a distance preceding a grade crossing, a warning light somewhere on the order of 100 to 200 feet before the crossing. Is that something that we could implement? And if not, why not?
Although it's not viewed in this particular case, all of the grade crossings have advanced warning signs. I don't believe that there's any that are lit or with blinking lights, but part of the inventory and the assessments that we've recently done, they all have advanced warning signs, and some of them have multiple advanced warning signs based on maybe some road curvature or some other physical aspect of the highway. So although they're not pictured here, there is advanced warning signs.
My point in the lights is the following. Many streets, especially in the suburban areas, are really cluttered with all sorts of signs, whether they are speeding signs, whatever they are. The lights provide a change. If they are not too expensive to install, could you give some consideration as to whether or not that would be an advantage? And you may get some history out of Florida.
Well, according to motor vehicle standards, these are not formally warning signs. They're informational signs, because a warning sign has to be a diamond sign. But your point's well taken, because we want to use any and all means available to appropriately wake people up to the hazards they may be approaching and what actions they need to take. So it's a point well taken. Well, as the railroad president, he's part of the process and able to provide input. And we're going to share this input across all three rail agencies, although New York City Transit no longer has any grade crossings. That was eliminated in the 80s, the last one.
And I'd mention, too, that you mentioned the expert consulting firm. They'll be in next week to begin their first report out of what they've seen from a limited sample of crossings that they've looked at on Metro North territory, and we've invited the Long Island representatives to come and sort of hear the report out and understand the process and see what we might want to do moving forward. So it's a very active consideration of the whole realm of technology that's out there.
And I believe finally this is again facing from east to west. And if you would go to the after. Yeah, and these again are temporary lines painted in the roadway. The epoxy high gloss with the glass in it, that'll be reflective. In addition, delineators will be placed on the fog line and on the center yellow line to give delineation. It's a post about 3 foot high that's bolted into the blacktop, and it gives again that delineation for lane so people aren't crossing over everywhere. Be it. Thank you. Thank you.
With permission, we'll move on to the next item.
Can I go back to 1 second? Sure. On the first presentation, Neil made me think a little about how we get the word out. Two other options in the area might be the local DMV offices, as everybody over some period of time gets their license renewed. We may want to do something with DMV about giving people pamphlets or whatever it is in that context. I mean, you have to take an eye exam. Maybe you have to see one of the, colorful, very informative things that, that we put together. And the other thing might be working with AAA because they have a variety of places in the region that people come into, and almost all of them are drivers, which is, I assume, notwithstanding our customer issue, what we're trying to get to with the grade crossing are the drivers, some of whom may never go on our system, and so we have to look at ways in which we can reach them separately, and the DMV offices and the AAA offices might be ways in which we can accomplish that even in a greater numbers than we have before.
Very good suggestions.
Further to that, you may want to consider, I don't know what the mechanics are, and you're the experts in that, not me, but inclusion of something like this in our apps, MNR and LIRR.
We've absolutely talked about the possibility of interstitial messages coming up at times.
Okay. Moving on.
The last item to bring for consideration is the Blue Ribbon Panel Recommendations Update. And go ahead and go on to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about it. In August of 2013, the chairman convened a Blue Ribbon panel of experts to come in and take a look at the three rail agencies following some mainline track derailments, to take a look both very specifically at track conditions and track inspections, as well as overall safety culture and safety assurance activities to determine how our agencies could best move forward to protect against such events in the future. So I mentioned it, and so just refer people to it in their books. So the objectives of the Blue Ribbon Panel Review, you can read them on the screen. Essentially, we wanted to make certain that we understood the underlying causes of the events that occurred, and much more importantly, that we were taking advantage of best industry practices and technology to guard against these kinds of events in the future. And as a result, a number of recommendations were received from the Blue Ribbon Panel. The recommendations were received last August, so we're approaching the anniversary of those recommendations, and we thought it was appropriate in this meeting to take a moment to talk a little bit about where we stand in responding to the recommendations. So the next slide. I guess before we actually provide a little quantitative information, one thing that we would say is that we received 24 recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Panel. They were very carefully considered recommendations, and the MTA and its agencies are very much committed to implementing all of the suggestions we received from that activity. So the next slide shows a little bit about where we stand. I guess working from left to right there, there were 24 recommendations that were applicable to the Long Island Railroad, of which 20 of those recommendations have now been implemented, and the remainder are in progress. On the New York City Transit System, 23 recommendations were applicable, and 14 are fully implemented. That's about 3/4 of the recommendations. And finally, on Metro North, 23 of the recommendations that we received were applicable to the Metro North property, and at this point, about almost 40% of those recommendations have been implemented. But that high-level look doesn't really provide you the kind of detailed information that might be of interest. And so what we have done is we've asked each of the rail agencies to talk a little bit about one or two projects that are underway as a direct result of the Blue Ribbon Panel work, so that you can kind of see what goes on behind the scenes to implement these recommendations. So the first is from Metro North on bridge monitoring system.
Good morning. I'm Glenn Hayden. The recommendation was to evaluate emerging autonomous bridge monitoring systems that can detect impact from vehicle strikes. Just to put this in context, in the last 24 hours, we've had 4 bridge strikes on Metro North territory, 1 on the Beacon line, 3 on the New Haven line. One of the New Haven line strikes caused minor damage to a sidewalk shed and a secondary structural member. But we find out about these things normally from a police officer who calls in responding to a truck stuck under a bridge, or perhaps a complaint or a call from a local citizen. We don't get real-time data, and so what this recommendation is to provide some way that we get good, quick information and doesn't depend on someone calling it in. A little bit of context. We have over 200 undergrade bridges on the territory. This is broken down by line. And historical data, you'll see that over the last 5 years, we've had closing in on 1,000 strikes. The biggest area we get strikes is the New Haven line, which is completely grade separated, and the Connecticut portion of New Haven line is our largest strike impact area. We're actually working with Connecticut DOT, sharing the results of what we've done, and they're very interested in funding that to go be rolled out on their territory. Just some other looks back at some of the things that have happened. The first was over on the Port Jervis line. The second one, Mamaroneck Avenue, is on the New York State portion of the New Haven line. And once more, Fenimore Road. This one actually resulted in some damage. If we have a box truck or something like that, we usually get away with no damage. If we have something like this where the truck is carrying work equipment or like a cement mixer, those type of trucks tend to be heavier and cause more damage. The one at Fenimore Road, we were out of service for a day till we made structural repairs.
Can I interrupt to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Has any thought been given to the possibility of installing sensors or light detection materials on the underside of bridges where there is at least truck traffic that passes that way?
We have not installed anything that senses the bridge height. What we have done is, in conjunction with some of the local municipalities, put in flashing lights and stuff like that.
Would you do me a favor? Would you take a good hard look as to whether or not it is cost effective to install sensors of some sort or another that would give you a warning when there has been impact,
Okay?
rather than awaiting a police report or the like?
Well, what you're going to see, we have installed sensors on 4 bridges, accelerometers. And these 4 bridges on the New Haven portion, the New York portion of the New Haven line, Fenimore Road, which was the one that was damaged, Mamaroneck Avenue, Westchester Avenue, and King Street, we've put in a collision detection system. So we now have the ability to have remote information. These are a series of accelerometers, if you go to the next one, and a control box, so that this system automatically records any acceleration of the bridge.
And my question then is, how expensive, ballpark number, is that kind of an installation?
We have found that for these 4, they average about $40,000. The biggest single cost factor is the availability of power. As you'll see in a couple seconds, if we have a local power source, it uncomplicates things. If we don't, we have to put in a solar panel or bring a long utility feed down.
Because it seems to me that the potential for damage and the potential indeed for injury is so great that it might pay to expand this process or some variation of it elsewhere.
Well, actually, we're entirely aligned here. We've put in 4. We did a risk assessment based upon the frequency of hits at the bridges and the vulnerability of the structure to damage if hit. Some heavy weight bridges of various types are less susceptible. So the 4 we chose and the 10 that we're ultimately going to do under this initial program were the ones that were the most vulnerable and the most often hit. So, this is the initial step, and we plan on rolling it out throughout the years. And as I said, Connecticut DOT is very interested in doing their portion, which for us significantly is the largest number and the largest volume of hits. Just a couple technical facts. A bridge is pinned at one side, it floats at the other, so the bridge can expand and contract with heat and temperature variation. The 2 hazards you're looking to address are structural damage to the bridge that reduces its ability to carry load. The second is you can also damage the alignment of the track, which would affect the likelihood of a derailment. So you're looking at both of those. But the approach Glenn's talking about is risk-based in terms of exposure and where the likelihood of strikes would be. Because I think it would be fair to say that you couldn't put this on every bridge, it wouldn't be cost effective, but on high-profile bridges where the likelihood of a strike to cause an undesired event would be ones we would look at.
Let me tell you why I focus on that. Over the course of the past few years, both the state DOT and the city DOT have focused on trucks wandering onto things like the West Side Highway, Henry Hudson Parkway, and the like, and causing significant damage as that has happened. The volume of that seems to have increased.
I agree.
And the volume seems to have increased as newer, younger people get behind the wheel of these trucks and are unfamiliar with the roadways. That could very well happen here. And all I'm asking you to do is something which you obviously are already ahead of me in doing, and that is to take a good hard look at the extent to which this merits expansion.
Andrew, you had a question?
Yes. Is it 100% of these kinds of accidents height-related or width-related, or some of these just routine hitting the base of a bridge?
I would estimate that probably 90 to 95% are height. Every once in a while, we do have someone stray off and hit an abutment.
Do we have height posted at every bridge opening?
Yes, yes, we do.
Is that the railroad or MTA that's done that, or has the municipality done that?
We post the height.
We post it. Do we track multiple accidents by the same company, or?
Do we?
In many of the reported incidents, it's after the fact and we don't know who struck the bridge, and
Yeah.
some we do. And you know, Carmen's not talking, but the transit authority structure gets struck all the time, especially on hung mezzanine structures off the elevated. So, and we try to keep that information and go after repeat offenders.
Yeah, the ones that are stuck there. Like yesterday, we had one stuck there, so, yeah, then you got them. And actually, a lot of times, it tends to be rental vehicles, because it's someone driving something that they aren't used to that height. So we get a lot of rider rent-a-trucks and stuff like that. The accelerometers are hung on the bridge steel, and there's a control box off on the side, which has the smarts that you use to discern whether there's actually a hit. We'll come to that in a second. But this is one of the ones where we had to put in a solar panel because we did not have any power nearby. As I said, that kind of increases the cost. If you go to the next. This is an internet-based thing, so the system collects and stores the data, and you'll see in a minute how it's analyzed. And then when the system feels that there is a hit, and there's some calibration required because the accelerometers, of course, also pick up the vibrations induced by train traffic and highway traffic beneath. So this is basically what we, as engineers and inspectors, can access. We can dial into this. We can go to any bridge that is equipped, and we can get a summary page, or we can look at current conditions. If you go down to the next one, you can see exactly the data that is generated by these accelerometers. And one more. We can get a tabular report as well, so we can see in real time or with timestamps whenever anything happened. Finally, we actually had kind of a serendipitous event. While we were out there installing one of these systems, we actually had a bridge hit. So here again, here's one of these rental trucks, and you can see on the graph the high spike is indicative of that particular hit. Now you see all the noise to the right. That's the stuff that we need the smarts in the control box to filter out. Those are train passages. So each one has to be calibrated for each structure so that we're not getting false positives, but we are getting real-time alerts of a problem. Looking ahead, as we said, we're going to expand this initially from 4 to 10 and then continue going. We're also setting up, after it's calibrated, so that we can get emails when there is a strike. We will have our bridge inspectors, our OCC, sent an email. So in immediate time, it doesn't require someone absolutely looking and monitoring and everything. You get an email message, there's a hit, so-and-so, and then we can go out and check it. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Has any communication been made to Hertz rental trucks or Ryder or any of the big rental truck companies about notifying their renters about height restrictions and making sure they have clearance before they, and maybe asking them to hold the The
I'm
renter.
not aware of any, but I'll check into that. Thanks, David.
So we move on to New York City Transit now to talk about an example of one of the recommendations being implemented there.
Okay, good morning. The recommendation that we'll be discussing involves the review of track maintenance activities to identify methods of improving employee safety and productivity, such as the use of mechanization to perform work traditionally done by manual means. The new process that we're going to be showing is much less labor-intensive and will reduce the potential for injury. As part of safety strategy projects that we've been conducting, we initiated a technology task force in November of 2014. This task force is focused on developing new processes and technology to enhance safety and improve productivity. It's chaired by the Office of System Safety, and it also includes members from a number of divisions within the Department of Subways, someone from Capital Program Management, and someone from Procurement. I'd like to introduce Pat Lavin, who is the chair of the task force, and he's going to discuss some of their efforts.
Good morning. What the strategy group did is we did an analysis of the division of track lost time accidents from 2010 to 2014, and the two key areas that we identified to be problematic was in material handling as well as contact with the movement of rails. So what we did is, based on that information, we focused on the installation of CWR, which is continuously welded rail, which is a 390-foot piece of rail that we frequently install. The current practice, as Cheryl said earlier, is labor-intensive. It takes approximately 18 to 20 individuals to install a rail, and this frequently results in lost time accidents and serious lost time accidents that take up approximately 1/3 of our injuries in the division of track. So the next slide, we have a video to show you how we're currently installing CWR.
Now you know where the term throwing a rail came from, seriously.
So we went out to the industry and we identified.
What's the weight of that rail? That was a question. So it's probably 110 or 114 pounds per yard?
It's probably either 110 or 115 pound rail.
Per yard.
So it's 115 feet over every 3 feet, 115 pounds. So we went out to the industry and we identified different products. One of them is this device made by McCullough called the TRT Critter. And the next video will show how it can be done with 3 individuals with a lot less potential for injury.
It's picking up the rail off the invert and dropping it on the plates and the fasteners. So instead of having to lift and throw the rail, it's doing it mechanized means.
So that demonstration in that video actually occurred in May of this year. We consider it a successful demonstration. Where we're going now is procurement has notified the vendor that we have an intent to continue to pursue this. The division of track is developing a scope of work, and we're actually looking at additional vendors for additional methods of mechanizing our process. Any questions?
If no questions, we'll move on to a couple examples of ways Blue Ribbon panel recommendations are being implemented at Long Island Railroad.
Good morning. The Long Island Railroad is committed to providing safe and reliable service to our customers, and a critical component of our strategy is ensuring the integrity of our rail infrastructure. Glenn Greenberg, our Deputy Chief Engineer, is going to talk about what the engineering folks have been able to accomplish regarding two of the recommendations which relate to rail grinding and to the elimination of rail joints.
Good morning. The first recommendation we're going to discuss is engaging technical experts to analyze rail fatigue defects and failures with modification to rail specifications and maintenance practices as needed. The main focus of this is removing fatigued rail surface conditions, which is caused by repeated passage of train wheels over time. And the main way we do that is with rail grinding. We remove upwards of 15/1000ths of an inch of rail. It removes any damage that's at the surface, which prevents defects from forming. It's a key component of a good track maintenance program. Like I said, it improves the surface condition of the rail, it improves the ride quality, and reduces noise and vibration, which helps the surrounding neighbors. But the most important part is it extends the life of the rail and other components such as turnouts. The elements, just go back please. The key part there is removing defects before they become broken rails. Next slide please. This is the rail grinder. We just arrived on the property about a week ago. We were making steady progress. Next slide please. It's a multi-year contract that we have in place. It's actually with all three agencies. In our 2015 program, we anticipate grinding over 150 track miles, including 4 major interlockings. This level of effort will continue for 3 years until all 500 main track miles on the Long Island are completed. Subsequently, we'll be grinding approximately 90 miles a year, which will maintain a cycle between 3 to 7 years, depending upon the level of traffic on the line. The next strategy is to develop strategies to reduce rail joints, to reduce the likelihood of bolt hole fractures occurring in rails. The main way we do this is by welding joints. And we have a little video that we're going to play that shows how this process works. First step is to remove the joint bars. Next step is to cut an 1.5-inch gap between the rail ends. That's where the weld material will flow into, and weld the two ends together. We clean the rail ends before we put the molds on. We have to align the rail ends both laterally and vertically. Then we apply a series of molds that will contain the molten steel that pours in to weld the rail ends together. This is called packing sand. It just fills any gaps between the mold and the rail ends to prevent the molten metal from leaking out. Next step is to preheat the rail ends to approximately 1800 degrees. This prevents the rail steel from shattering when the steel is poured in.
Yesterday, you all serious? Oh, okay. Give me a wipe, all right, buddy?
Immediately following the preheat, the crucible with the thermite material is placed over the mold. And the reaction is started. It's actually an exothermic reaction with this material called thermite, which is basically a metallic oxide with steel dust in it. Pours into the mold cavity. After it sets for a period of time, move the crucible, and then we can strip down the mold.
around real fast in the whole part. Go like this, short, like.
Excuse me, what type of material is that they use to join?
It's about the actual molten metal itself. It's called thermite. It's a compound of aluminum and iron oxides with steel mixed in it. When it goes this reaction, it goes to about 5,000 degrees. So it's basically becomes molten steel. Last step is to grind the weld down so it's smooth and even with the surface of the rail on either side. And that's the finished weld. It's almost as strong as the parent steel on either side of it. And doesn't make any noise, and it doesn't have any moving parts. It doesn't have any bolts to loosen up or cause bolt hole breaks.
How long does the process take?
From start to finish, from actually arriving on the site to completion, about an hour and a half.
And how often does it happen at the same spot? Or is the intent, is there a useful life of what you just did?
Those welds should last pretty much the life of the rail.
Which is?
Anywhere. At least, yeah.
Okay.
Is the need to do this in a given location dictated by the frequency of the train service or the weight of the vehicles traveling over it?
It's actually dictated by the need to create a bolted joint, which could result from anything from repairing a defect in the rail, like when we do our detector car defects, if we had a broken rail, if we do any kind of program work, like we replace a grade crossing, it creates joints. So it's really dictated by any work that occurs there.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
I'd like to go back to that rail grinding train or car. As I understand it, you have only one such facility within both Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and to the extent applicable, New York City Transit. How expensive are those facilities? Because, as I understand it, your objective is to do this once every 3 years. If it is as important as it sounds to me, that may not be enough.
Rail grinding is typically performed on a cycle, and how often that cycle occurs depends upon the tonnage of trains that pass over the site. In the industry, we go by a metric called million gross tons, annual million gross tons. Typical grinding cycle in the industry is 75 million gross tons. On the Long Island Railroad, the highest tonnage line we have is about 25 million gross tons. That's on our main line through like Mineola, for instance. So that would equate to a 3-year cycle that we would grind at. Other lines that have much lower tonnage can be ground at much lower frequencies. That's why I think I'd indicated if we do 90 miles a year, we can perform this cycle, which ranges anywhere from 3 years to 7 years and cover the whole territory.
If it was cost effective, if you had an additional train, would you be able to do it more frequently, and would that serve a useful purpose?
Perhaps, we're limited, of course, by how many lines we can work on at a given time. We're working this rail grinding in conjunction with other work that we perform. And like I said, it's not really necessary to grind more frequently than that.
Chuck, if I could just add, those rail grinders are contract services. That's a vendor that we bring on. So if we needed to bring on more than one train, they only have so many trains, and they're doing freights and other railroads all over the country. But you can schedule them and bring them on more frequently if you feel the need.
Back to the joint elimination. As of the beginning of this year, there were approximately 2,500 bolted rail joints in existence on Long Island. We generated an average of 1,000 joints a year between defect repair, project work, and other maintenance work. Since the beginning of 2014, our annual goal, we increased it significantly to 1,600 joints per year. This will enable us to eliminate all existing bolted joints by the end of 2019. Yes, on our entire system.
Long Island. There's a couple of general comments here. If while there are nuanceical differences in terms of maintenance standards and their application among the three rail agencies, there's probably more commonality than not. The issue of moving what was a technology of 39-foot bolted rail over 100 years ago to continuously welded rail is something we've been aggressively doing for probably 25 or 30 years. While it may be painful to some, but the whole issue at Bridgeport was the issue of Metro North getting behind not only joint elimination, but where you go from a different size rail, different poundage. Because if you have a lot of different sizes of rail, you have a lot of different, it's an even more complicated joint than this, it's a transitionary joint. And I think both railroads are trying to reduce the number of different rail options they have. And what are you moving toward at Long Island?
We're moving towards just two standard rail sections.
And what are you moving toward, Glenn, at Metro North?
Same thing, 115 and 136.
And then staying on top of the issue of joint elimination through this, because you not only have the potential for bolt hole failures, but other failures at a joint. If a joint isn't perfectly aligned, vertically or laterally, that joint gets pounded by the rail rolling, with the wheel rolling over it. So a lot of what the railroads and transit does with respect to ongoing maintenance that supports state of good repair, that in the capital program side is supplemented by replacement, you know, at a year cycle like you were asking, is stuff that is embedded in the operating budgets. And the agency heads make sure that that is there and that is being done. It's extremely essential to the safe and reliable operation of the rail system.
Tom, I'm sorry, that's from the operating budget?
These actions are on the operating budget.
It's both. Some of it's capitally funded, which supports, for instance, what I mentioned, like, for instance, if we repair or replace a grade crossing that's done under the capital program, that joint elimination effort is typically funded by that capital program. The supplemental efforts that we're doing to catch up on some of the backlog is now operating funded.
If they had a broken rail and they had to come out and fix that broken rail and patch in a piece of rail and make it CWR, that would be done in the operating budget. But if you were installing CWR and had to do the joint elimination with that, that would be on the capital budget.
I see. And then what about the prior video? By the way, these are very helpful to actually see this. The prior video that showed the rail, the lifting as you talked. That machine that we were looking at, yeah. How many of those are we considering purchasing? And that, I assume, is from the capital budget.
Pat Lavin?
Sorry, we would be required to purchase 3 of them, and they're approximately $300,000 apiece.
That's all we have for Neil.
Mr. Chair, I actually appreciate that we're almost at the annual date of the Blue Ribbon Panel's report, and I think it was good for us to recap many of the things. You focused exclusively on the physical components of the recommendations, and yet, having the privilege of flipping through it briefly, the majority of the commentary in the Blue Ribbon Panel's report were cultural and organizational. So now we're 11 months since that report and a year and a half since Spite and Dival. Can you give us, and maybe we're not ready today, but it'd be helpful to hear even just anecdotally a view about the culture changes that you think you've observed in safety? Again, given that the report focused, I would say, the majority of the commentary on culture, which is a human issue, not the clearly important and very well attended to physical issues.
Well, I'll let the agency heads comment briefly now, but I think at a future safety committee meeting, it would be worthwhile to give them the opportunity in a venue to have a 20 or 30-minute time frame to respond to that. I couldn't agree with you more that the long-term institutional change, transformational change in safety has to happen at a cultural level. You can assist by providing means that are mechanization and more safe ways of doing work tasks, but it has to start at the worker level. And if any of the agency heads want to provide a brief comment now, fine, but I would like at one of the future meetings, we'll have a specific, and maybe it's such an important topic, it may be worthwhile to devote the entire meeting to each one of the agencies allowed to talk about what they're doing to change the culture. Carmen?
No, I think your question's wonderful, and the basis for everything we do is really centered around the culture that we create, and we know that leadership owns that culture. At Transit, we've been working at this for a number of years, not so much just around safety, because I think your culture goes way beyond safety, if you will. I think the culture of your organization either supports safety or it doesn't, and it supports quality and customer service and all the other things we do. So we're not working at it one-dimensionally, but we really spend a lot of time trying to understand, what is it that we as an agency really stand for? What do we have, where do we put all our energy? And, clearly that's our customers, clearly that's our employees, and all of our activities center around that. And from that activity of really understanding, we've developed a strategy, and one pillar of that strategy is around safety. So it's not around rule compliance, but it's really around how do you move the culture, the paradigm from one of compliance to one of, commitment, so that people, live these values around safety 24 hours a day, regardless if there's leadership around. And so this is an area that myself or anyone on my leadership team could speak to, I think, fluently, and they'd be happy to. So I look forward to the chairman's opportunity he would provide us to speak on the issue, because it is clearly the heart of everything that we do in the organization, is the culture.
Joe, Pat, do you want anything?
You've heard me come before you, and obviously Metro-North was criticized and nationally criticized for a lack of focus on safety. And I don't want to, I'd rather turn and say that there wasn't a conscious decision not to focus on safety. It was a decision that focused on a tremendous input into on-time performance. And what you're seeing even right now in terms of making investment into equipment, that sends a message out that you're willing to invest in doing the maintenance, that everybody felt that took a sideline to making sure that trains are getting in on time. We've also been, even recently, brought down by the NTSB because they believe that Metro-North truly is making those changes, that they are recognizing that the focus has to be safety, and it's been the support of this board and the chairman and the interaction of what's going on with the safety that's been noted nationally. And we're now being pointed out for several of the things that we have done that are now being used as industry initiators, that they're calling the industry again to come on in and come and meet with us. So I look forward also to being able to do that in a report that we can talk about a number of things that we're doing to make those changes.
Yeah, and Joe mentioned the emphasis out there. I mean, one of the endeavors that I've challenged Glenn to work on here is just simple things like cleaning up the right-of-way. And it's an example of where, in the past, the effort was very much to get the work done. That was given the priority. But they weren't doing the whole job. They weren't doing the cleanup. They weren't doing the little things. And that creates dangers out there on the environment that can bite you at some point in time later in the future. The other thing, and both Carmen and Joe mentioned as well, is the empowerment and the engagement of the workforce in the safety culture. And that gets to the efforts both of the railroads are doing with the working with the FRA and working with the unions on CPR3. I always get it wrong. But it is very much an engaged process that gets confidential close call reporting as a way of doing business. And we are working very hard at that. We're working hand in hand with the labor workforce in trying to do that. And to me, the final thing is just constantly preaching safety as a priority. You at no point in time can you ever underemphasize safety. You always need to remind people that it is a priority, and you need to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. You need to demonstrate that by the actions you take, whether it's buying machinery or allowing more track time to do cleanup, or allowing more track time to get the field welds done in the field that in the past they didn't have enough track time, so they didn't do it. So you need to just keep pushing and prioritizing those types of things and build that culture so that it becomes a way of life for everybody on the railroad.
As a precursor to what you're going to see at the board meeting when we go through the financial plan, you will see a direct outgrowth of what the rail agency presidents said in terms of their commitment to safety in the form of investments we are making with funds that we have available to be able to increase the level of safety and make sure it's unmistakably clear what that priority is. because it's not just the commitment of the senior executive staff, it's following up with the resources necessary to do that. And you'll see that specifically in line items regarding to safety investments being made at each one of the three rail agencies. If there's no further, Jonathan?
I was going to ask a question, similar, related, but a little different from the one you've been addressing, and addressing quite well, thank you. And it is just with respect to the NTSB. I'm curious as to how much contact we have with them with respect to anything still ongoing from the incidents we've had, and when the board could expect perhaps a briefing on that. I note that in looking at the work plan, we had in January a report on the special investigation from last November, but I didn't note anything specifically relating to NTSB on the forward work plan.
I'll let David elaborate a little bit further, but it goes without saying that while the NTSB is not a regulatory agency, it's a safety oversight agency, the FRA is the regulatory agency, and in transit, it's the FTA. And to say that we have an ongoing communication with them to make sure they know what we're doing is an understatement. But we can devote, and we will devote, a future meeting to go through a more exhaustive review of where we're at on any of those recommendations. And I don't think there'll be a problem with that, right?
No, not at all. And it's something that I pay attention to on an almost weekly basis. There were interactions with the NTSB as recently as yesterday. President Giletti mentioned that he was recently testifying at an NTSB hearing on improvements that have been made at Metro North with respect to safety culture. And of course, we've talked about the accident that occurred at Valhalla on August 13th. There's now a technical review scheduled in Washington to review the factual material developed in that investigation. Ann Kirsch and perhaps other representatives from Metro North will be headed down there to participate in that. So we're very much engaged with what's happening there, and we'd be more than happy to come back at a future meeting and brief on that.
That might be something worth doing. I mean, the headlines may fade, but the pain and the problems, as you know better than I, continue. And perhaps in September or October, whatever will be better for you, Tom.
Well, one of the advantages we have with David, given his prior experiences elsewhere, is that he's been part of that psyche and part of that mind, whether it's at an oversight or regulatory level. So what we've asked him to do in his role here at MTA Safety is to make sure we're responsive along the lines of what they would be looking at from us in an expansive way, in an information exchanging way, not in a defensive way.
Absolutely.
And so we'll just continue that. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Seconded, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Check 1 2, check. Check 1 2. Check 1 2, check.